Maria Santos had always been different from the other soldiers on the base. While most recruits came from military families or sought adventure, she joined the army to escape poverty and support her sick mother back home in rural Texas. At 22, she was smaller than most of her peers but possessed a determination that burned brighter than anyone else's. The Fort Henderson military base buzzed with activity that Tuesday morning. Hundreds of soldiers moved across the vast compound, their boots creating rhythmic sounds on the concrete. Maria had been stationed there for 8 months, working her way up from the bottom ranks through sheer willpower and dedication. She never complained about the grueling training sessions or the endless drills that left other soldiers exhausted and bitter. General Richard Blackwood ruled the base with an iron fist. He was a man in his 50s, tall and imposing with graying hair and eyes that seemed to cut through people like steel blades. The general had served in 3 different wars and earned numerous medals, but his methods were often questioned by those brave enough to speak up. Most soldiers feared him, walking carefully around his presence and speaking only when spoken to. Maria had managed to stay off the general's radar for months. She kept her head down, followed orders without question, and focused on her duties. Her bunk was always perfectly made, her uniform immaculate, and her performance during training exercises consistently excellent. She believed that hard work and dedication would eventually earn her the respect she deserved. The morning started like any other. Maria woke up at 5:30, made her bed with military precision, and joined her unit for morning exercises. The sun was just beginning to rise over the base, casting long shadows across the training grounds. She loved this time of day when everything felt fresh and full of possibilities. During breakfast, Maria noticed unusual activity around the base. Military vehicles were moving in and out more frequently than normal, and several high-ranking officials she didn't recognize were walking around with serious expressions. Something important was happening, but as a lower-ranking soldier, she wasn't privy to such information. Her unit was assigned to weapons maintenance that day. Maria had always excelled at this task, understanding the intricate mechanics of firearms better than most of her peers. She worked methodically, cleaning and inspecting each weapon with careful attention to detail. Her sergeant often praised her work, noting that weapons serviced by Maria never failed during training exercises. Around noon, an announcement echoed across the base. All soldiers were to report to the main assembly area for an important briefing. Maria quickly finished her current task and joined the stream of soldiers heading toward the large open area, where the entire base could gather. The atmosphere felt tense with whispers and speculation flowing through the crowd. General Blackwood stood on a raised platform, his presence commanding immediate attention. Behind him were several other high-ranking officers and what appeared to be government officials in civilian clothes. The general's expression was more serious than usual, his jaw set in a hard line that suggested the news would not be pleasant. "Soldiers," the general's voice boomed across the assembly, amplified by the sound system. "We have received credible intelligence about a potential security breach on this base. Someone among you has been leaking classified information to unauthorized parties." A murmur of shock and disbelief rippled through the crowd. Maria felt her heart rate increase. The idea that someone on their base could be a traitor was almost unthinkable. They were all sworn to protect their country and their fellow soldiers. The general continued, his eyes scanning the assembled crowd like a predator searching for prey. "Until we identify and apprehend the individual responsible, this base is on complete lockdown. No one enters or leaves without my personal authorization. We will conduct thorough investigations of all personnel, starting immediately." The weight of suspicion settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. Soldiers glanced at each other with newfound wariness, wondering if the person next to them could be the traitor. Maria felt the same uncertainty, but she also felt a growing sense of dread. Something about the general's tone and the way he was handling the situation didn't sit right with her. As the assembly began to disperse, Maria caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. Through a window of the administration building, she saw 2 men in civilian clothes examining files and documents. One of them held up a photograph, and even from a distance, Maria could see it was a picture of her. Her mind raced as she tried to understand what was happening. She had never leaked any information, never spoken to unauthorized individuals about base operations, never done anything that could be considered treasonous. Yet somehow she was apparently under suspicion. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and confusion. Maria tried to maintain her normal routine, but she could feel eyes watching her wherever she went. During the evening meal, conversation stopped when she approached tables, and her usual friends seemed distant and uncomfortable around her. That night, as Maria lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, she replayed every interaction she'd had over the past few months. She thought about her phone calls home to her mother, her conversations with fellow soldiers, and any documents she might have handled. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary or potentially compromising. Sleep came fitfully, filled with nightmares of accusations and courts-martial. Maria woke several times throughout the night, each time hoping the events of the day had been just a bad dream. But the reality of her situation became clearer with each passing hour. She had no way of knowing that by morning, her life would change forever in a way she could never have imagined. The next morning brought an atmosphere of tension that seemed to hang over the entire base like storm clouds. Maria woke up earlier than usual, unable to sleep through the night. Her stomach churned with anxiety as she prepared for what she sensed would be a difficult day. Other soldiers in her barracks were quieter than normal, everyone seemingly lost in their own worries about the security investigation. During morning roll call, Maria noticed that several soldiers were missing. When she quietly asked her bunkmate Sarah about it, Sarah whispered that they had been taken for questioning during the night. The military police had come for them without warning, escorting them away in official vehicles. No one knew when or if they would return. The morning training session was canceled, replaced by mandatory individual interviews with the investigation team. Soldiers were called one by one to report to the administrative building, where they disappeared for hours at a time. Those who returned looked shaken and refused to discuss what had happened during their questioning. Maria tried to focus on her assigned duties, but concentration proved nearly impossible. She was assigned to help with inventory in the supply warehouse, a task that normally required careful attention to detail. Today she found herself making mistakes, miscounting items, and having to start over repeatedly. Her hands trembled slightly as she handled the paperwork, a physical manifestation of her growing anxiety. Around midday, a military policeman appeared at the warehouse entrance. He was a stern-looking man with a clipboard, scanning the workers until his eyes settled on Maria. Her heart nearly stopped as he approached her directly. "Private Santos," he said in a voice devoid of emotion. "You're needed for questioning. Come with me immediately." Maria's legs felt weak as she followed the MP toward the administration building. Other soldiers in the warehouse watched her go, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and relief that they hadn't been chosen. She tried to maintain her composure, walking with the military bearing that had been drilled into her during basic training. The administration building seemed different today, more intimidating than she remembered. Military police stood at various doorways, and the usual civilian staff were nowhere to be seen. The MP led her down a corridor she had never walked before, past offices with closed doors and drawn blinds. They stopped at a heavy wooden door marked Conference Room B. The MP knocked twice and opened the door without waiting for a response. Inside, Maria saw a long table surrounded by chairs, most of which were occupied by men in military uniforms and civilian clothes. At the head of the table sat General Blackwood, his expression unreadable as he studied documents spread before him. "Private Santos," the general said without looking up. "Please take a seat." Maria sat in the single empty chair facing the panel of investigators. She tried to keep her back straight and her hands steady, drawing on her military training to maintain composure. The room felt oppressively quiet except for the sound of pages turning and pens scratching on paper. One of the civilian investigators, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, began the questioning. He asked about Maria's background, her family, her reasons for joining the military, and her activities on the base. The questions seemed routine at first, the kind of background information that would be in her personnel file. But gradually the questions became more specific and more troubling. They asked about her phone calls, her computer usage, and whether she had ever been approached by strangers offering money or other incentives. They wanted to know about her financial situation, her mother's medical expenses, and whether she had ever felt desperate enough to consider illegal activities. Maria answered each question honestly, but she could see skepticism in the investigators' faces. When she explained that she sent most of her military pay home to help with her mother's medical bills, they exchanged meaningful glances. When she mentioned that she had been struggling financially since her mother's diagnosis, she saw one investigator make a note with particular emphasis. The questioning continued for over 2 hours. Maria's throat became dry and she asked for water, which was provided without comment. The investigators took turns asking questions, sometimes circling back to topics they had already covered, apparently looking for inconsistencies in her responses. General Blackwood remained largely silent throughout the questioning, but Maria could feel his eyes on her constantly. Occasionally, he would lean forward to whisper something to one of the investigators, causing them to pursue a new line of questioning. His presence dominated the room even when he wasn't speaking. Finally, the lead investigator closed his folder and leaned back in his chair. "Private Santos," he said, "we have reason to believe that classified information has been transmitted from this base to unauthorized recipients. We also have evidence suggesting that someone in your position and with your access level could have been responsible for these breaches." Maria felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. "Sir, I would never do such a thing. I've never shared classified information with anyone. I've never even spoken to unauthorized individuals about my work here." The investigator nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. "We understand that financial pressures can sometimes lead good people to make poor decisions. Your mother's medical expenses, your own financial struggles. These create vulnerabilities that foreign agents are trained to exploit." "I don't understand what you're suggesting," Maria said, though she was beginning to understand all too well. "I've never been contacted by foreign agents or anyone else asking for information. I've never sold or given away any classified materials." General Blackwood finally spoke, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Private Santos, denying the charges will not help your situation. We have evidence of communications between this base and known intelligence operatives. We have records of financial transactions that suggest compensation for services rendered. The question is not whether these things happened, but whether you're willing to cooperate with our investigation." Maria stared at the general in disbelief. The accusation was so far from the truth that she struggled to comprehend how such evidence could exist. She thought about her simple life on the base, her dedication to her duties, and her complete lack of contact with anyone who could be described as a foreign agent. "General, sir, I don't know what evidence you think you have, but I can assure you that I am not a spy or a traitor. I have served this country and this base with complete dedication. I would never do anything to harm my fellow soldiers or compromise national security." The room fell silent again. General Blackwood studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stood up, signaling the end of the questioning session. "Private Santos, you are restricted to quarters pending further investigation. You are not to speak with other personnel about this matter. You are not to leave the base or make any phone calls without authorization. A guard will escort you to your barracks." As Maria was led away, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window of the conference room. She looked pale and shaken, nothing like the confident soldier she had been just days before. The foundation of her military career, built on honor and dedication, seemed to be crumbling beneath her feet. The restriction to quarters felt like solitary confinement, even though Maria remained in the barracks with other soldiers. She was forbidden from participating in training exercises, eating meals with her unit, or engaging in normal social interactions. A military police officer remained stationed outside the barracks at all times, ensuring she didn't violate the terms of her restriction. Her fellow soldiers treated her differently now. Some looked at her with suspicion, wondering if the accusations might be true. Others showed sympathy but kept their distance, afraid of being associated with someone under investigation for treason. The easy camaraderie she had enjoyed with her unit was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable silence whenever she entered a room. Maria spent long hours lying on her bunk, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what was happening to her. She replayed every conversation she'd had, every document she'd handled, every person she'd interacted with since arriving at the base. No matter how hard she thought, she couldn't identify anything that could be construed as suspicious or treasonous behavior. The most painful part was her inability to call her mother. The restriction on communications meant she couldn't explain why she hadn't sent money home that month or why she couldn't talk. She imagined her mother waiting by the phone for their weekly conversation, growing worried when the call never came. The thought of her sick mother's anxiety added another layer of anguish to Maria's situation. On the third day of her restriction, Maria was summoned again for questioning. This time, the session was held in a smaller room with fewer people present. General Blackwood was there, along with 2 investigators she recognized from the previous session and 1 new face. A woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as Agent Martinez from a federal agency whose name was never specified. Agent Martinez took the lead in this questioning session. Her approach was different from the previous investigators, more personal, more sympathetic, but somehow more threatening. She spoke in a calm, almost maternal tone while asking questions that cut to the heart of Maria's vulnerabilities. Maria, Agent Martinez began, using her first name instead of her rank. I want you to know that I understand your situation. A young woman from a poor family, trying to support a sick mother while building a career in the military. It's an enormous burden. Anyone in your position would feel overwhelmed. Maria remained silent, unsure where this conversation was heading, but sensing danger in the agent's sympathetic tone. We know you received several phone calls from someone claiming to represent a medical foundation. Agent Martinez continued. Someone who offered to help with your mother's medical expenses in exchange for what they described as routine administrative assistance. Maria's heart began racing. She had indeed received such calls, but she had dismissed them as scams and never pursued them further. Those were solicitation calls, she said. I never responded to them or provided any information. Agent Martinez smiled slightly, as if she had been expecting this response. Maria, we have recordings of those conversations. We know you expressed interest initially. We know you asked questions about what kind of assistance would be required. The accusation hit Maria like a physical blow. Yes, she had asked questions during the first call, but only because she was curious about what appeared to be a scam. She had never seriously considered accepting any offers or providing any assistance. I asked questions because I wanted to understand what they were asking for, Maria explained. When I realized they wanted information about the base, I hung up and never spoke to them again. But you did speak to them, Agent Martinez pressed. Multiple times. And during at least one of those conversations, you asked specific questions about compensation and payment methods. General Blackwood leaned forward. Private Santos, we also have evidence of money transfers to an account associated with your mother's medical care. Payments that coincidentally began shortly after those phone conversations. Maria stared at the general in confusion. What payments? I've never received any money from anyone except my military pay. My mother's medical bills are paid through her insurance and the money I send her from my salary. Agent Martinez opened a folder and pulled out several bank statements. These records show deposits into your mother's medical account from an overseas source. Deposits that total nearly $20,000 over the past 6 months. Maria looked at the bank statements in shock. The account number was correct and the deposits were real, but she had no knowledge of where the money had come from. Her mother had mentioned that her medical expenses seemed to be covered better than expected, but Maria had assumed it was due to improved insurance coverage or charity assistance from the hospital. I don't understand how this money got there, Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never received any payments from anyone. I never provided any information to those callers or anyone else. The investigators exchanged glances, and Maria realized how her protestations must sound. The evidence appeared damning: suspicious phone calls, unexplained money transfers, and her clear financial motivation. From their perspective, she looked like a textbook case of a compromised asset. General Blackwood stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Private Santos, the evidence against you is overwhelming. Someone has been systematically extracting classified information from this base and selling it to foreign operatives. You had access, opportunity, and motive. The money trail leads directly to you. Sir, I swear to you I am not guilty of these charges, Maria said, standing as well and facing the general directly. I may not be able to explain the evidence you've presented, but I know I have never betrayed my country or my fellow soldiers. The general's face darkened with anger. Your denials are insulting to the intelligence of everyone in this room. We have recordings, financial records, and testimony from other sources. Yet you continue to lie to our faces. I'm not lying, sir. I'm telling the truth as I know it. General Blackwood moved around the table toward Maria, his imposing presence filling the small room. The truth, Private Santos, is that you sold out your country for money. The truth is that information you provided has potentially compromised ongoing operations and put lives at risk. The truth is that you are a traitor. Maria stood her ground, though her heart was pounding. With all due respect, sir, that is not the truth. I am a loyal soldier who has never betrayed her oath or her country. The general's face turned red with rage. In that moment, something snapped inside him. Years of military command, frustration with the investigation, and anger at what he perceived as continued lies converged into a single moment of lost control. Without warning, General Blackwood reached out and grabbed Maria by her hair, yanking her head back violently. The sudden, shocking assault sent pain shooting through her scalp and neck. The other people in the room froze, stunned by the general's sudden loss of composure. "You will tell us the truth," the general snarled, his face inches from hers, still gripping her hair. "No more lies, no more denials. You will confess to what you've done." The pain was intense, but more than that, Maria felt a surge of anger and determination she had never experienced before. In that moment of assault and humiliation, something fundamental changed inside her. The fear and confusion that had plagued her for days suddenly crystallized into absolute clarity about what she needed to do. The general's violent action would be the catalyst for everything that followed. Though no one in that room could have predicted the extraordinary chain of events that Maria's response would set in motion. The moment General Blackwood's hand grabbed her hair, Maria's military training kicked in with automatic precision. She had spent months learning self-defense techniques, and her instructors had always emphasized that assault from a superior officer was still assault. But more than training, something deeper inside her sparked to life. A fierce determination that she would not be broken by false accusations or physical intimidation. Instead of crying out or pleading, Maria did something that shocked everyone in the room. She remained perfectly still, locked eyes with the general, and spoke in a voice that was calm, clear, and unwavering. "Sir, I am requesting that this interrogation be recorded and that I be provided with legal counsel immediately. What you are doing constitutes assault, and I am formally filing a complaint with the Inspector General's office." The words hung in the air like a challenge. General Blackwood's grip on her hair loosened slightly, surprise flickering across his face. None of the investigators moved, apparently uncertain how to respond to this unexpected development. Maria continued, her voice gaining strength. "Furthermore, I am invoking my rights under the Uniform Code of Military Justice to refuse to answer any further questions without legal representation. I am also requesting an immediate medical examination to document the assault that has just occurred." Agent Martinez was the first to recover from the shock. "Private Santos, you're hardly in a position to make demands. The evidence against you is substantial, and your cooperation would be in your best interest." "My cooperation has been freely given throughout this process," Maria replied, still maintaining eye contact with the general who continued to grip her hair. "However, physical assault crosses a line that I will not accept, regardless of the accusations against me." General Blackwood finally released her hair and stepped back, his face a mixture of anger and something that might have been respect. "You think you're clever, Private Santos, but filing complaints won't change the evidence against you." Maria straightened her uniform and touched her scalp where the general had grabbed her hair. "The evidence against me may be substantial, but it's also false. And now I have evidence of misconduct during this investigation that calls into question the integrity of the entire process." The room fell silent again. The investigators looked at each other uncertainly, while General Blackwood stared at Maria with narrowed eyes. She had just transformed from a frightened suspect into something much more dangerous, a soldier who knew her rights and was prepared to fight for them. Agent Martinez tried to regain control of the situation. "Maria, let's not escalate this unnecessarily. We can arrange for legal counsel, but it would be better for everyone if we could resolve this matter quickly and quietly." "There's nothing quiet about false accusations and physical assault," Maria replied. "I want everything documented, and I want witnesses to everything that happens from this point forward." General Blackwood's jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake, Private Santos. This investigation will continue with or without your cooperation. The evidence speaks for itself." "Then let it speak in a proper legal setting with proper procedures," Maria said. "I have nothing to hide, but I will no longer participate in an investigation that includes physical intimidation and assault." One of the military investigators finally spoke up. "General, perhaps we should adjourn this session and reconsider our approach. The private has raised legitimate procedural concerns." The general turned his glare on the investigator. The only legitimate concern here is identifying and prosecuting the spy who has compromised this base. Everything else is secondary. Maria seized the moment. If finding the real spy is the priority, then you should be investigating who has access to my personal information and who would have the ability to manipulate financial records and communications. Someone has gone to great lengths to make me appear guilty. Her words had an immediate effect. Agent Martinez leaned forward with interest. Are you suggesting you've been framed? I'm stating it as fact, Maria said with conviction. Someone with access to classified information about the investigation. Someone who knew about my financial situation and my mother's medical needs. Someone who could manipulate electronic records and create false evidence. That person is your real spy. General Blackwood scoffed. Conspiracy theories won't help you, Private Santos. The evidence is clear and documented. Evidence can be manufactured, Maria replied, especially by someone with the right access and technical skills. I'm not a spy, General, but I believe I'm being used as a cover for someone who is. The investigators began talking among themselves in low voices. Maria could see that her words were having an impact, planting seeds of doubt about the case they thought they had built. She pressed her advantage. I want a polygraph test administered by an independent examiner. I want a full forensic audit of all the evidence, including the financial records and recorded conversations. And I want protection from whoever is really responsible for these security breaches. Agent Martinez stood up. Private Santos, those are serious requests that will require time to arrange. Are you prepared to remain in protective custody while we investigate these claims? I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to clear my name and identify the real traitor, Maria said. General Blackwood slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. We're wasting time chasing shadows when the guilty party is standing right in front of us. Maria turned to face him directly. General, with all due respect, your conduct during this investigation has been unprofessional and potentially criminal. I will be filing formal complaints about your behavior, and I suggest you recuse yourself from any further involvement in this case. The silence that followed was deafening. A private soldier had just told a general to remove himself from an investigation, and she had done it with such calm authority that even General Blackwood seemed momentarily stunned. Agent Martinez closed her folder. I think we need to take a break and reassess our approach. Private Santos, you will be escorted back to quarters while we review your requests and consider next steps. As Maria was led from the room, she felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Hope. She had found her voice and her strength, and she had turned what seemed like certain defeat into the possibility of vindication. The general's violent outburst had backfired spectacularly, giving her the moral authority and legal standing to demand better treatment, but Maria had no idea that her bold stand had also attracted the attention of someone else on the base and someone who had been watching the investigation closely and who now realized that Private Santos posed a serious threat to carefully laid plans. The real spy was about to make a move that would change everything once again. That evening, Maria sat in the barracks writing everything down in a notebook she had requested from the MP stationed outside. She documented every detail of the investigation, every question asked, every piece of evidence presented, and most importantly, General Blackwood's assault. Her military training had taught her the importance of detailed record-keeping, and now that training might save her career and her freedom. As she wrote, Maria began to see patterns she had missed before. The timing of the mysterious phone calls coincided perfectly with the start of the investigation. The money transfers to her mother's account had begun just days after the security breach was discovered. It was almost as if someone had been setting her up from the beginning. Around midnight, Maria was startled by a soft knock on the barracks door. The MP who had been stationed outside entered quietly, followed by someone Maria didn't recognize, a young woman in civilian clothes with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. Private Santos, the MP said quietly. This is Special Agent Chen from the Criminal Investigation Division. She needs to speak with you. Agent Chen approached Maria's bunk with a serious expression. Private Santos, I apologize for the late hour, but I have information that can't wait until morning. Your requests for an independent investigation have been approved, but we may not have much time. Maria sat up, instantly alert. What do you mean? Agent Chen glanced at the MP, who stepped outside to give them privacy. I've been conducting a parallel investigation into the security breaches at this base. Your case caught my attention because it was almost too perfect. Every piece of evidence pointing directly to you with no ambiguity or loose ends. You think I'm being framed too? I think you're a convenient scapegoat, Agent Chen replied. But more than that, I think whoever is really responsible for these security breaches is someone with high-level access to both classified information and the investigation itself. Maria felt her pulse quicken. Someone like who? Agent Chen pulled out a tablet and showed Maria a series of documents. Someone who knew about the investigation before it was announced. Someone who had access to your personnel file and financial information. Someone who could manipulate evidence and direct the course of the investigation. As Maria looked at the documents, her blood ran cold. They showed access logs and security records that painted a very different picture from the one she had been presented with during her interrogations. General Blackwood, Maria whispered. General Blackwood has been using his position to access and sell classified information for over a year, Agent Chen confirmed. When we got close to identifying him, he needed a scapegoat. You were perfect. Young, financially struggling with access to some classified materials but not senior enough to have protection. Maria stared at the evidence in disbelief. But why assault me today? If his plan was working, why risk exposing himself? Agent Chen's expression darkened. Because your demand for proper legal procedures and independent verification threatened to expose the manufactured evidence. He panicked and lost control. That assault may have been the mistake that brings him down. What happens now? Maria asked. Now we need your help to catch him in the act, Agent Chen said. Tomorrow morning you'll be taken for another interrogation session. This time we'll be monitoring everything. We need him to reveal details about his operation that only the real spy would know. Maria felt a mix of fear and determination. What if he becomes violent again? We'll have agents positioned nearby and you'll be wearing a recording device. But Maria, I need you to understand, this is dangerous. General Blackwood has a lot to lose and desperate people do desperate things. I understand, Maria said without hesitation. I want to clear my name and catch the real traitor. I'm willing to take the risk. Agent Chen nodded approvingly. There's one more thing. We've discovered that General Blackwood isn't working alone. He has at least one accomplice on the base, someone who's been helping him access information and manipulate the investigation. Who? We're not certain yet, but we suspect it's someone in the administrative staff who has access to personnel files and financial records. Tomorrow's operation should help us identify them as well. Agent Chen packed up her materials and prepared to leave. Get some rest, Maria. Tomorrow will be the most important day of your military career. Everything depends on you maintaining your composure and following the script we'll provide. After Agent Chen left, Maria lay awake for hours thinking about the revelations. The man she had respected and feared, the decorated general who commanded their base, was not only a traitor, but had nearly destroyed her life to save himself. The injustice of it filled her with anger, but also with a steely determination to see justice done. The next morning came sooner than expected. Maria was awakened at dawn by the same MP who had escorted Agent Chen the night before. He handed her a small device that looked like a button, which she was instructed to attach to her uniform collar. The recording equipment is activated, he whispered. Agent Chen and her team will be monitoring everything. Remember, stay calm and let the general incriminate himself. Maria was taken to the same conference room where she had been interrogated before. General Blackwood was already there, along with Agent Martinez and 2 other investigators. The general looked tired and agitated, as if he hadn't slept well either. Private Santos, General Blackwood began without preamble. We've reviewed your requests from yesterday. While we appreciate your concerns about procedure, we cannot allow legal technicalities to interfere with national security. Sir, I believe I have the right to legal counsel regardless of the circumstances, Maria replied, following the script Agent Chen had provided. The general's jaw tightened. Rights are a luxury that traitors forfeit when they betray their country. You will cooperate with this investigation, or the consequences will be severe. Agent Martinez looked uncomfortable with the general's aggressive tone. General, perhaps we should proceed more carefully given yesterday's incident. General Blackwood turned on her with fury. Yesterday's incident was the result of frustration with a suspect who continues to lie, despite overwhelming evidence. Private Santos knows exactly what she's done, and she knows we have proof. What proof do you have that wasn't obtained through illegal surveillance or manufactured evidence? Maria asked, again following her script. The general's face flushed red. Illegal surveillance? Every communication was monitored through proper channels. Every financial record was obtained through legitimate investigation. You think you can discredit evidence by questioning methods? I think the evidence should be able to stand up to scrutiny, Maria replied. Unless someone has been manipulating it from the beginning. General Blackwood stood up abruptly and began pacing. You want to know about the evidence? Fine. We have recordings of your conversations with foreign operatives. We have documentation of payments made to your mother's medical account. We have access logs showing you downloaded classified files outside of normal procedures. Maria felt her heart racing, but she maintained her composure. How do you have access to financial records that aren't part of any official investigation? How do you have communication intercepts that weren't ordered by proper authorities? The general stopped pacing and stared at her. In that moment, Maria could see that he realized he had said too much. The evidence he was describing could only have been obtained by someone operating outside normal channels, someone with unauthorized access to multiple systems. I have access because I'm the commanding officer of this base, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You have access because you're the one who's been stealing and selling classified information, Maria said, abandoning her script and speaking from her heart. You needed a scapegoat when the investigation got close to you, so you chose me. You manipulated evidence, manufactured communications, and planted money to make me look guilty. The silence that followed was electric. General Blackwood's face went pale, then red as he realized that his carefully constructed frame-up was collapsing around him. In that moment, everyone in the room understood that the real spy had just been exposed. The accusation hung in the air like a live wire. General Blackwood's face cycled through emotions, shock, rage, and then something that looked almost like relief. For a moment, Maria thought he might confess, but instead, his military training took over and he straightened into his commanding posture. That is an extremely serious accusation. Private Santos, he said, his voice regaining some of its authority. You are accusing a decorated officer of treason, based on nothing but speculation and desperation. But Agent Martinez was no longer looking at Maria with suspicion. Her experienced investigator's instincts had caught the same inconsistencies that Maria had pointed out. General, how exactly do we have access to financial records that weren't subpoenaed through proper legal channels? General Blackwood's eyes darted around the room, and Maria could see him calculating his options. The investigation required certain expedited measures to prevent further security breaches. All methods were approved through appropriate channels. Which channels? Agent Martinez pressed. Because I don't have any documentation of financial surveillance authorizations in the case file. Before General Blackwood could respond, the door to the conference room opened and Agent Chen entered, flanked by 2 military police officers. She looked directly at the general with an expression of grim satisfaction. General Richard Blackwood, Agent Chen announced, you are under arrest for violations of the Espionage Act, conspiracy to commit treason, and abuse of authority. You have the right to remain silent. The general's composure finally cracked completely. This is outrageous. I am the commanding officer of this base. You cannot arrest me based on the wild accusations of a suspected spy. We're not arresting you based on her accusations, Agent Chen replied calmly. We're arresting you based on 18 months of investigation, intercepted communications with known foreign operatives, and financial records showing payments of over $2 million into offshore accounts under your control. Maria watched in amazement as the MPs moved to restrain General Blackwood. The man who had terrorized her and nearly destroyed her life was suddenly powerless, his authority stripped away in an instant. Agent Martinez stood up, looking stunned. Agent Chen, I need to understand what's happening here. Are you saying the entire case against Private Santos was fabricated? The case against Private Santos was a carefully constructed frame job, Agent Chen confirmed. General Blackwood used his position to access her personal information, manipulate communications records, and plant false evidence. The money in her mother's medical account came from the same sources that were paying him. General Blackwood made one last attempt to regain control. You have no proof of any of this. The evidence against Santos is solid and documented. Agent Chen smiled coldly. The evidence against Santos was created by you, using your administrative access to alter records and plant false information. We've been monitoring your computer access for weeks. Every file you modified, every record you changed, every communication you fabricated, we have it all." As the MPs began to escort General Blackwood from the room, he turned back toward Maria with a look of pure hatred. "You think you've won something here, Private Santos, but you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. This goes much deeper than you realize." Maria met his gaze steadily. "I've gotten myself into the fight for truth and justice, General. That's exactly where I want to be." After General Blackwood was taken away, Agent Chen turned to Maria with an expression of respect and gratitude. "Private Santos, your courage in standing up to intimidation and demanding proper procedures is what made this arrest possible. Without your refusal to accept false accusations, we might never have caught him." Agent Martinez shook her head in disbelief. "I owe you an apology, Private Santos. I believe the evidence we were presented, and I should have recognized the inconsistencies." "The evidence was very convincing," Maria replied graciously. "General Blackwood is clearly skilled at deception and manipulation. The important thing is that the truth has come out." Agent Chen consulted her tablet. "There's still more work to do." General Blackwood had at least one accomplice on the base, someone who helped him access records and plant evidence. "We're executing search warrants and making arrests as we speak." As if summoned by her words, Agent Chen's radio crackled to life. "Agent Chen, this is Team 2. We have Master Sergeant Williams in custody. His computer contained extensive communications with General Blackwood regarding the Santos frame-up." Maria recognized the name. Master Sergeant Williams worked in the administrative office and had access to personnel files and financial systems. He had been the one to process many of her requests and had known about her financial situation with her mother's medical bills. "Williams was the inside source," Agent Chen explained. "He provided General Blackwood with the personal information needed to make you a credible suspect and helped manipulate the digital evidence trail." Over the next several hours, Maria learned the full scope of General Blackwood's operation. He had been selling classified information to foreign operatives for over 18 months, using his position to access sensitive materials and his authority to avoid scrutiny. When a routine security audit began to close in on him, he had orchestrated an elaborate frame-up to shift suspicion onto Maria. The money planted in her mother's medical account had come from the same offshore sources that were paying General Blackwood. The recorded phone conversations were fabricated using voice synthesis technology and edited communications. The access log showing her downloading classified files had been retroactively altered by Master Sergeant Williams. "Your mother's medical situation made you a perfect target," Agent Chen explained. "General Blackwood calculated that investigators would find your financial desperation believable as a motive for espionage. He didn't count on your integrity and courage in fighting back." As the day wore on, Maria felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that her name was cleared, anger at the injustice she had endured, and amazement at how close she had come to losing everything. But more than anything, she felt proud that she had stood up for herself when it mattered most. Agent Martinez approached her as the interrogation room was being cleared. "Private Santos, I want you to know that your conduct throughout this ordeal has been exemplary. You maintained your integrity under extreme pressure and never wavered from the truth." "I was taught that a soldier's most important weapon is their honor," Maria replied. "I couldn't let anyone take that away from me, no matter what the consequences." Agent Chen overheard the conversation and nodded approvingly. "That attitude is exactly why General Blackwood's plan failed. He assumed you would crack under pressure or accept a plea deal to avoid prosecution. He underestimated your character." As the sun began to set over the base, Maria walked across the compound for the first time in days without an escort. Other soldiers looked at her differently now, not with suspicion but with something that looked like respect and admiration. Word had spread quickly about how she had exposed the real spy and brought down a corrupt general. But Maria knew her biggest challenge still lay ahead. She needed to call her mother and explain everything that had happened, clear up the confusion about the mysterious medical payments, and begin rebuilding her military career after this traumatic ordeal. 3 months later, Maria Santos stood before a packed auditorium at the Pentagon, wearing a crisp dress uniform adorned with several new ribbons. The ceremony was unlike anything she had ever imagined. When she first enlisted, she was receiving the Defense Meritorious Service Medal for her role in exposing one of the most damaging espionage cases in recent military history. The investigation had revealed that General Blackwood's operation had compromised dozens of classified operations and potentially cost lives. The Foreign Intelligence Service that had been paying him had used the information to counter several planned military actions and had passed details to hostile groups in conflict zones where American forces were operating. Private Santos, now Sergeant Santos, the Secretary of Defense, announced to the assembled crowd, demonstrated extraordinary courage and integrity in the face of false accusations and physical intimidation. Her refusal to accept injustice not only cleared her own name, but led to the identification and arrest of a dangerous spy ring that had been operating for over 2 years. Maria stepped forward to receive her medal, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The shy, financially struggling young woman who had arrived at Fort Henderson had been transformed by adversity into someone who understood her own strength and principles. After the ceremony, Maria was approached by Agent Chen, who had become something of a mentor during the months following General Blackwood's arrest. "How does it feel to be the hero of the story instead of the victim?" she asked with a smile. "Honestly, it still feels surreal," Maria replied. "6 months ago, I was facing court-martial and possible prison time. Now I'm being honored at the Pentagon." "You earned every bit of this recognition," Agent Chen said. "But more importantly, you've inspired changes in how the military handles internal investigations. The new protocols require independent oversight and multiple levels of verification specifically because of what happened to you. The new protocols had been implemented base-wide after an internal review revealed numerous procedural failures in Maria's case. No soldier could now be subjected to intensive interrogation without legal counsel present, and all evidence had to be verified by independent sources before being used in investigations. General Blackwood had been sentenced to 35 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to espionage charges. Master Sergeant Williams received 20 years for his role in the conspiracy. The sentences sent a clear message that betraying one's country and fellow soldiers carried severe consequences. Maria's mother had made the trip to Washington for the ceremony, her health much improved thanks to proper medical treatment that was now being paid for through legitimate veterans' benefits that Agent Chen had helped them navigate. Seeing her mother in the audience, healthy and proud, meant more to Maria than any medal or recognition. "Mija," her mother had said earlier that morning, using the affectionate Spanish term that always made Maria feel like a little girl again. "I always knew you were strong, but I never imagined you were this strong." The strength had surprised Maria too. When she first enlisted, she had been motivated primarily by financial necessity and a desire to serve her country. She never expected to find herself at the center of a major espionage case, or to discover that she possessed the courage to stand up to a general officer who was trying to destroy her. After the formal ceremony, Maria attended a smaller reception where she was introduced to various military and civilian officials who had been involved in the case. Many expressed admiration for her composure under pressure and her refusal to accept false accusations. "What will you do now, Sergeant Santos?" asked a colonel from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. "Have you considered law school? Your performance during this investigation suggests you might have a future in military justice." Maria smiled. "I've actually been accepted to officer candidate school. I want to become a military police officer and help investigate cases like this one. I figure my experience as a suspect gives me unique insights into how these investigations should be conducted." The colonel nodded approvingly. "The military needs officers with your integrity and perspective. You'll make an excellent investigator." As the evening wound down, Maria found herself standing on a balcony overlooking the Potomac River, reflecting on everything that had changed in her life. Agent Chen joined her carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts," Agent Chen said, handing Maria one of the cups. "I was thinking about that moment when General Blackwood grabbed my hair," Maria said. "At the time, it felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. But now I realize it was actually the moment everything began to turn around." "How so?" "It was when I stopped being afraid and started fighting back," Maria explained. "Before that moment, I was reacting to what was happening to me. After that, I took control and started making things happen." Agent Chen sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "That's an important lesson. Sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest opportunities, but only if we refuse to be victimized by them." Maria nodded. I used to think that strength meant following orders and not causing problems. Now I understand that real strength sometimes means standing up and demanding justice, even when you're facing powerful people who want to silence you. That's a lesson that will serve you well as an officer, Agent Chen said. The military needs leaders who understand that following orders is important, but standing up for what's right is even more important. As they stood in comfortable silence, Maria thought about the soldiers back at Fort Henderson, who were now serving under new leadership and improved procedures. The base had been thoroughly cleaned of corruption, and morale had improved significantly once word spread about what had really happened during the investigation. Many of her former fellow soldiers had reached out to apologize for their initial suspicions and to congratulate her on her vindication. Some admitted they had always sensed something was wrong with the case against her, but hadn't known how to voice their concerns. Maria bore no grudges. She understood that they had been manipulated just as effectively as she had been. Agent Chen, Maria said eventually, I want to thank you for believing in me when almost everyone else thought I was guilty. I didn't believe in you because I thought you were innocent, Agent Chen replied. I believed in you because of how you handled the situation. Guilty people don't usually demand more investigation and independent verification. They try to minimize exposure and cut deals. Maria laughed. I was too stubborn to cut deals. Even when everyone told me it would be easier to just confess and accept a plea agreement, something inside me refused to admit to something I didn't do. That stubbornness saved not just your career, but probably prevented General Blackwood from compromising even more classified information, Agent Chen pointed out. If you had accepted the frame-up, he would have continued selling secrets indefinitely. As the evening came to an end, Maria felt a deep sense of closure about the ordeal that had nearly destroyed her life. She had not only survived false accusations and systematic persecution, but she had emerged stronger and more confident than ever before. Thero, young woman who had been yanked by the hair in an interrogation room, had transformed into a decorated soldier who would soon become an officer dedicated to ensuring that no one else would suffer the injustices she had endured. Her story would be studied in military justice courses and investigation training programs for years to come. Walking back through the Pentagon corridors, Maria reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. She had joined the military to escape poverty and support her family, never imagining she would become a symbol of integrity and courage. But sometimes, she realized, the most important battles are the ones we never expected to fight, and the greatest victories come from simply refusing to give up on the truth.